When you were first starting out on the piano, you probably learned a few fingering rules like keep your fingers in a 5-finger position, don't move, or don't put your thumb on black keys, or if you have repeated notes, make sure to switch fingers. But here's the thing, as you're progressing out of beginner music and getting more into intermediate music, some of those old fingering rules you find out maybe weren't the best ideas to start with, or at the very least they need to be modified. And there's also a few new things you need to be considering when you're deciding which fingers go on which notes. Tip number 1, you need to be free to move your hands around the keyboard. Don't get tied down to just a couple notes. A lot of you might still be using that beginner principle of find 5 notes and kind of stick with it. A lot of you who went through some beginner method books probably for a long time played with your 5 fingers here, or maybe here, or both hands were here, and all the notes fell within those 5 fingers, and the rule was, hey, don't move your hands. Maybe even teachers yelled at you because you were playing a piece and then you were going up and you switched to a different finger. They said, no, C, put your thumb on C, don't move your thumb off C. That works sometimes in beginner music, that's very safe, but you're playing intermediate music now. Intermediate music uses the keyboard. It's only going to get more extreme as you get to more advanced music, so you have to be free to move around. Now, don't move around in a stupid way that doesn't make any sense at all. If you have these 3 notes in a row, don't go, that would be dumb. But the point is that you're not going to have these pieces where you can just say, okay, this is a thumb on E piece anymore. You're going to have to be free to use the whole keyboard. Number 2, when deciding which fingerings you should use, consult the articulation. Look at the articulation to help you make your decisions. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have this, 5 notes in a row, all with a slur. So you play them all smoothly straight down. That's probably the best fingering, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But let's say some of those notes are doubled and there's little slurs over them, so it's going to be, well, no longer is the best fingering. It would be much easier just to go, or the articulation, since there's a little slurs, will allow you to pick up your hand and replace on the new note. So the articulation, the slurs, articulation, staccato will inform the fingering a lot. Here's a great example from an intermediate Mozart piece. Our right hand has to do this. That's fine, but because we have those groups of slurs, it's much better to go, or it makes a lot of sense because the slurs are moving anyway. It makes a lot of sense to go down, move. Another great example is if you had a bunch of staccato notes in a row like this. Use the staccato to your advantage. It's staccato. You don't have to hold the note, so you can move your fingers around more freely, like, that's okay. You can do that because it's staccato. You don't have to hold it. So to combine the first 2 ideas, finding groups of 5 notes and playing them is completely fine, but allow the articulation, the staccatos, and the slurs to inform your fingering even more so than groups of 5 notes. Now, tip number 3 is almost funny because it's so obvious. It's so simple, but I know it's going to blow some of your minds because it seems to go against what for some reason some people believe about piano fingering. And this tip is simply use your best fingers. You have 5 fingers on your hand, and basically universally, the first 3 fingers, thumb through middle finger, 1, 2, 3, are better than these 2 fingers are bad. These are terrible fingers. I don't care how good you get at piano. Some people get this idea that somehow all fingers must be completely equal. It's not true. When you're really good at piano, your first 3 fingers, your thumb through your middle finger, are going to be better than these 2 stupid fingers over here. So if you have the option, use the better fingers. Let's say I had this little melody here. It goes like this. That's actually pretty simple, right? If you can see though, I'm changing my fingering around to get up here, and then I'm trilling on great fingers. 1 and 3 are great fingers to trill on, then going back down. Nothing I did was difficult. That was a very easy crossover, but some people almost think, like, I don't know, you get extra credit, you get extra style points if you don't move your hand, so they would try to play it like this. Now it's doable, but your trill on your 4 and 5 fingers will never be as good as your 3 and 2 or your 3 and 1 because they're just better fingers. So why not stick with a better finger? I don't know any performer who's I've ever heard in their life just say, oh, I choose to trill sometimes on bad fingers just because I can. Now, sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to use these fingers. You can't get away with using these 3 all the time. But the principle is, if in doubt, if given a very difficult thing, you might as well move your hand and get to the better fingers. I'm going to play a really popular intermediate piece called Arabesque by Burgmüller for you that really showcases these two things happening at once. So it starts out like this. Well, that makes a lot of sense to use 5 fingers. That felt great to roll up on those. But then later on, when the left hand has it, it makes a ton of sense to do this. Move, move, move. So, do I look like I'm in a rush to make that move? No, it's very simple. I have tons of time to make that move. So you're probably starting to see the theme here. These are not definite yes or no rules. These are tools you should be using, ideas you should have in your mind when you're trying to figure out what your best fingering is. To say, okay, when should I group in a group of 5? This feels good in a group of 5. This one really doesn't. Maybe it would be okay to have a chance with your articulation to make a move to a better finger. So don't be stuck in groups of 5. They're not always bad. Don't be stuck in them. Look at the articulation. If the articulation allows you to, because maybe there's a gap, try to make a move to a better finger. Now, tip number 4 is a lot like tip number 1, where I'm mostly just trying to break up an old rule some of you know that you will never ever break for any reason. And that rule is thumbs shouldn't go on black keys. That's just one thing that lots of teachers say. A lot of people, you might just hear someone casually say that, oh, don't put your thumb on a black key. Thumbs can't go on black keys. And some people follow that 100% of the time. Now, this is an example where that original guideline, don't put your thumb on black keys, is actually a good guideline. The problem is when you follow it just religiously and you never ever break it. There are lots of times where thumbs were great on black keys. What you have to know is the reason why you're avoiding thumbs on black keys in the first place. So why shouldn't you put thumbs on your black keys? Why is that a rule that we teach people in the first place? Well, there's kind of 2 big reasons. The first reason is your thumb is a lot shorter than your other fingers. Even when you curve your fingers, you have a nice curve to them, they still curve here. They all become close to the same length, but your thumb is still much shorter. So one of the really practical reasons is black keys are really far away from your thumb. Once your thumb goes on a black key, it's going to get your other fingers out of position normally. So if you have a nice passage here and your thumb is hanging out down here, the other fingers might be up here in between the white keys and black keys where they should be, but the thumb often can't reach as easily. Just get your thumb to a black key, you're gonna have to make this move. So often you see beginners put thumbs on black keys in the worst way, where they'll make this horrible kind of twisting motion to reach up there. Oh yeah, almost forgot. The other reason you don't want to put your thumb on black keys in general is thumbs are a little louder than your other fingers, especially when they're jumping up to that black key. So you can get kind of a pop on that note. So if you just note that should be quiet and you put your thumb on a black key that should be quiet, it's pretty hard to keep that note under control. So the new rule or guideline that I want you to have in mind is thumbs shouldn't go on black keys when they're doing one of those 2 things. Maybe you have a fast passage and you have to jump up with your thumb. Your thumb really gets your hand out of position. Or you have a quiet note, you end on thumb. That's gonna be much harder to do. Get your thumb up there. But there are lots of times where thumb on black keys makes tons of sense. So for example, check out this short passage here of A Little Flower by Cornelius Gurlitt. It makes so much sense. Like I kind of want the line to crescendo anyway. To that note, it's just there and I can just do that. It avoids all the awkwardness of trying to go cross over or use your 5 up here and then stretch with your 2. Those can work too. Again, there's some ambiguity here in the fingering, but I would rather use good fingers, 4-3-2 or 3-2-1 rather than pinky, ring finger. Those are bad. Or I'd rather not skip over for an important note. That's kind of an important note not to miss. You can easily just do this. Your thumb is there. It can be loud because the context maybe even calls for that note to have a little accent on it. Then it just hangs out here while you do this. And there's no reaching issues afterward. There's no issues with getting to the next note. I'm not way out of position because those next notes are right there. So big kind of takeaway here is not putting your thumb on a black key is a fine principle. It's a fine guideline to sort of have in your mind, but you will find plenty of exceptions, plenty of times where not following that will make the rest of the fingering make a lot more sense. Now, number 5 is going to require you to possibly learn a little skill before you can apply it, and that skill is finger switches, finger substitution. So number 5 is finger switches are your friend. A finger switch in music is simply when you play a note with the finger, and then while you're holding that note, you trade it off with another finger so you can get to another note easier. So to give you a crazy, unrealistic example, here's a scale played with finger switches. It really opens up a world of all these fingering possibilities. As you get to upper intermediate music, then especially advanced music, It's basically required just to be a second nature skill you have where you can just swap off fingerings whenever you want to. Now, once you're good at it, it makes your life so much easier. It's the ultimate like get out of jail free card. You're playing a passage and there's a weird fingering and you're like, well, how do I get, I don't have a finger available. If you're good at just swapping, eventually you won't even think about it. You'll just make that swap automatically and free up a finger. So for example, here's an awesome intermediate piece called Sarabande by Handel that has really big fingering issues in the second part because there are notes you have to hold while other notes are playing. And to work out the fingering is really challenging. I'm just going to play a part of this for you. I'm going to go really slowly and watch for all the times that I swap out fingerings, basically to free up a finger for the next section. I can't even remember to point to all of them because I'm doing it so often. I sort of do it now just second nature without even thinking about it. I just swap a finger because I'm like, oh, I have to kind of grip to this G and I can't let go. I have 3 notes to play down here. Well, I better get a 4 or 5 finger on that note so I have 3 fingers available to play the next section. Now the last one here is specific, but it's really important. When you are jumping to low notes in the left hand, especially when you jump down, have a single low note, which happens a ton in intermediate and advanced music, don't always use your pinky. It's not bad to use your pinky sometimes, but don't automatically assume you have to use your pinky. Now I know why you do this. You're thinking, well, I'm moving down, the pinky is closer. Well, here's the thing. I'm going to play a few examples for you. If I'm moving from here all the way down to here, I'm traveling this far. I'm already jumping that far. I might as well go like a little bit further and get a good finger on that note for a couple reasons. First of all, the good fingers are more confident, but it's also easier to find your note. If your pinky is just searching for an F sharp, it's hard to find your pinky sliding over. If you move your 2 finger down there, you can feel the group you're on. You can feel that's your group. There's the F sharp right here. It's so much easier to identify the feel of notes if you're jumping down to something other than your pinky, especially even if you use your pinky. Do not do this. Strike from the sky and hope your pinky hits the right note. This is a terrible habit of fingering. You go pinky, pinky, and hope you get that note like that. Don't do that. Play, move down, find it, and play it. And even better than your pinky, play it with a good finger. Play it with 1, 2, or 3. See that? It's so easy. I had plenty of time to do that. And in fact, I didn't even have to look down for it because I can feel when my finger goes right there in between these 2 groups, that note, it's much harder to go. And then beyond that, when you need a bass note to be loud and powerful, you're not going to be stuck with your pinky trying to play a really loud note by itself, your weakest finger. You'll have a good finger. You can put your 2, you put your 3, you put your thumb on a loud bass note and get a good sound there. So I just gave you a lot of details, and your job now as an intermediate musician is to take these guidelines, take these ideas, and decide how they should apply to each piece. There's not a one-size-fits-all for fingering. If you have seen books that give you the fingering in them, like some intermediate, some advanced books that give you some good ideas and suggestions, you'll notice you compare 2 editions, they will have different fingering. You have to now do the work, kind of be creative, incorporate some of the beginner rules you already know that are good rules, kind of take the new twist on them or take the new information from this video with some intermediate skills that go into fingering, consolidate them, and make the best decision you can measure by measure in your piece. Oh, one more bonus tip before you go. When you get a new piece, experiment. You don't have to decide day one. I know people who on the first day, they want to go through and write a finger on every single note so they have it all set in stone. That's not the best idea, because as you learn the piece, as it speeds up, as you learn the technique and the notes better and the rhythm, you might realize places that, oh, I can use this fingering here. Experiment. Then at a certain point, after maybe you played a line for a few weeks, decide the best one and then try to be consistent. It's not a good idea to decide day one what you have to do. It's also not a good idea to just do, I just do whatever random fingering I want to, and you played the piece for 3 months. Neither one of those are a good idea. Be free, be creative, try out a lot of ideas, and then eventually try to set on a pretty consistent fingering Of course, leaving the door open for, oh, I just had an epiphany, that's a great idea, I'll switch that one there. But again, don't decide on day one, but at a certain point, try to lock down a logical fingering. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions about fingering on the piano, or if there's any other topics like this, kind of specific music topics you would love to see me cover. See ya.